Hi guys, I am back on my junky SM58 that was buried under a pile of wires because I broke a piece on my nice Rode mic, and now you have to endure the sounds of intimate jazz late night radio DJ. But I won't talk too much because I already talk too much in these things. So anyways, I've been busy, been working on a few projects. One is in the pipeline, but I'm not here to talk about that today. Today it is another library for Bazille. I got a lot of requests from some customers to do a sequel library, basically, to Equinox. And this is sort of kind of that. This is Solstice for Bazille, and I like to think of it as more of a companion piece to Equinox. It's a bit... There's still a lot of cinematic sounds in here. But it's a bit dancey at times, especially when we get to the drum loops. I kind of like to think of it as more of sort of a ambient, chill kind of library. But heavy on the sequences, quite a few chord patches actually, and I took it easy on the pads a little bit, so not too many of those. But I'm pretty happy with this assortment of patches, and I'll shut up now, and I'll go ahead and start playing. So, Mod Wheel. Kind of morphs into, I do a lot of morphing of overtones and stuff. Not too much of that. It gets a little weird sometimes, but Bellscape. Mod Wheel. Okay. So there's some polyatmos in there, which is nice. Darkstorm is a mono patch. Very dark, thus the name. Be careful with the mod wheel on this one. Aftertouch. Really like that one. This is a nice one. Play some gentle chords. The mod wheel just kind of makes those harmonics stop falling, so everything's stationary. Kind of an organ-y kind of, lots of partials there. I did a lot of stack voice modulation with partials and random modulation via the LFO. Fractalized fifths. I think this is a mono patch as well. Kind of cool. Moving right along. Let's see. I have to consult. It's poly, yes. Okay, so. Oh, that's right. It's. Yeah, the 16 voice polyphony prevents voice stealing when switching to a new note, but you can take advantage of that polyphony to layer notes like a 1 and a 5. Okay. The Aftertouch does some noisy, scratchy stuff. I really messed around with when you have stack voices, 8 stack voices in this, and yes, sometimes it gets a little bit CPU intensive because you've got 16 voices, as I explained in the patch description, to basically preserve the note so you don't get voice stealing as you press a new note. Sometimes a patch will appear to be polyphonic on the surface, but as I explained here, it's just so you don't get the awkwardness of voice stealing. If that doesn't matter to you, you can just go ahead and just make this a mono patch, and you'll save a little bit of CPU. There's some patches like that. Yes, I like this one. Mod Wheel. A little bit of Aftertouch. Also remember there's a lot of velocity sensitivity in my patches, but a few of these patches have an issue with velocity, and the reason for that is that just a couple of these patches have some amp mod happening. Basically, the amplitude of the envelope is being modulated by one of these modulation sources, and that often makes it kind of difficult to properly scale the amplitude of the envelope by note velocity, and it gets weird. And so on a couple of these patches, they're sort of kind of at full level, and if they're too loud or whatever, you can still adjust them in accordance with this global output knob. Sorry if I give you some nose flare. I don't have a pop filter or anything. I'm not using my Rode today, which has a filter already on it. Anyway, Secret Tunnels. This is a poly patch. I really like this one. Some interesting texture as the mod wheel opens up. Aftertouch gives it some phase distortion. Otherwise, it's just this nice I did a lot of cross modulation of filters, parallel filters in this one. So you get those textures. I try not to play too loud. Aftertouch is a little vibrato. Okay. I think this is a chord patch. The Aftertouch does indeed give you an unusual texture. Mod Wheel gives you some extra twinkly bits. I can't remember what chord voicing that is. It's like a weird sus2 or something. Love this one. Weird harmonic merging on the mod wheel. Think of the mod wheel as more of a switch on this one. Stack triads. Now this one, you have to give this one a chance. You might press a note and be like boring and move on, but I think there's an A minor, G minor, and an E minor triad, and they're all piled up on top of each other. So it's like a 12-note chord, and it's diatonic, so it's all in one scale. And this might not sound like much at first, but if you just let this patch breathe, you'll notice that it evolves in a really pleasant way, and it will be a nice little atmospheric bed, and it will completely be in the key of your track, if your track is diatonic, and yeah. So just hold the note, just let this breathe. Listen. Turn it up a bit. Hear it kind of crossfading between those triads. Mod wheel. If you stack some nice sequences that glitter over the top of that, it's going to be beautiful. Okay? And this is one of the newer ones that I just recently made. Some vibrato. I love that patch. Okay. Now these ones are kind of organy, but I still like them. A lot of patches did not make the grade, and okay, let's see here. All right, so we still got some velocity sensitivity, so that's good. It gets more interesting with the mod wheel. Try not to breathe on the mic. And then there's a minor version of that. You might notice here that there's some major and minor versions of patches. I think there's 7 or 8 pairs of patches, and I try not to get too carried away with that. But the reason that I do that is because every once in a while when you're working on a song, you have a nice chord progression going, and you bring in a sequence or a chord patch or something, and you do a chord change, but that really cool sequence patch or whatever, it's no longer, you need a minor chord or whatever. And so I try to, now these days, I try to provide both major and minor versions of various patches. I don't go overboard with it. There's 7 or 8 pairs of patches, so technically you could argue that there's only 92 patches, but there is another way to do diatonic chords that is actually one of the tricks up Howard Scarr's sleeve. He actually, in his Bazille cookbook that is available on Yuhi's website, there is a patch in there that actually teaches a trick that you can do with the mod mapper to create diatonic chord patches, and I do have those in this library, but I couldn't always do them because in order to do them, you kind of have to have a mod mapper available. And with some of these chord patches that I didn't always have an extra mod mapper available because it was already kind of doing some things. But I tried to make as many of those diatonic patches as I possibly could, but I still had to make major and minor versions of a couple of these patches. But I try not to, like I said, try not to get too carried away with that. Anyways, moving right along. This one, I made a lot of patches like this that didn't make the cut. I got a little too carried away with this kind of thing. And once again, that's a bunch of stack voices that are basically being randomly modulated by LFOs, because when you have the random phase of an LFO on each voice, they all start at a different point. So you can get a lot of really crazy random modulation of a lot of these stack voices that you have up in the air because you're doing it this way with the random phases of an LFO on a patch with like 8 of these stack voices. But I tried not to get too carried away with too many twinkly, wind chimey patches like that. I had a bunch of them, and a lot of them didn't make the cut, like I said. It was just a little overboard. On to the basses. You guys know that basses aren't my area. Okay, so just bear with me here. Okay, and this one is barely even really considered a bass. I like it. Okay, there's some pingy stuff that's hiding under the mod wheel. I was playing really hard there for a sec. Okay. This one's a little bit more generative. I think there's there's some mod wheel scale stuff that's happening. Or I meant mod map. There's a scale inside of here. This one. Okay. Gotta stop talking so much. Now this one doesn't sound like much until the mod wheel opens up. Now the golden rule of basses is that you're not supposed to have like a bunch of reverb and delay on them. And usually when I add delay to a bass sound, I crank the high pass filter all the way up, of course, so you don't have a bunch of low frequency stuff bouncing around in your in your bass sound. But I kind of broke that rule with this next patch. Okay, so it kind of sounded like a kind of a fingered bass guitar, sort of. And I really liked the sound of it, and I was messing around with the delay, and you know, I had the high pass up, but then I was like, no, I like it with the low frequencies. That's you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to have a bunch of low frequencies in your delay. I broke the rules with this patch. I like some of those bassy frequencies bouncing around. So, yeah. But you'll know, I'm not a bass guy. And honestly, sometimes I don't even know why I even bother programming basses. I have my own opinion about basses, but I've ranted too much in this walkthrough already. So, let's go with the next patch. We're into the chords now. So this is an add 9 chord. Some resonance with the Aftertouch. Patch. All right. There's a few patches like this. And let me just go ahead and group this. And there's a few patches that were really kind of intended to be layered with drums. And I was going to set this up beforehand. Sorry about this. Let me just go ahead and grab one of these drum patches. I think I'll just take that one. And so there's some of these patches that have this ducked downbeat, and by themselves they don't sound like much, but when you layer them with a drum pad, it starts to make sense. So I'm just going to mute that down there because I think there's a couple of more patches that sound better when layered with drums. Let's see, is this mono? Yeah. This one's a little bit generative, using some nice bell overtones as modulator oscillators. Okay. There's plenty of generative stuff in here, so as you can see, the mod sequencer is pretty busy. I think there's 2 or 3 patches in here that don't have any mod wheel or Aftertouch. It's not always possible. Sometimes you got so many things happening that it can get kind of difficult. This is one of the patches, hence the name, Diatonic Sevenths. This is one of the patches that uses that mod mapping trick in Howard Scar's Bazille cookbook that allows you to major, minor, major. That doesn't really work for the 5 chord because 5 chord is supposed to be dominant, and I believe there's like major sevenths in this, so that one doesn't work. There's your 6 chord, minor, your A. Another thing to take note of is a lot of these mono patches when you're doing this trick via the mod mapper. Especially when these patches are legato, the mod mapper doesn't really know when a new note has been pressed when you're in legato mode, and that doesn't really work for when you're doing this diatonic trick here. You have to lift your finger up and press a note, because if we tried to go legato here, when you press a new note, okay. Let's go up to the E. Okay. See, it's not moving. You have to lift your finger up. Okay. And of course, that was a mono patch, so I probably screwed things up just making it legato. There's another thing down here and I just want to stress this for the devs at Yuhi, that you notice how we have this single trigger mode in the LFOs? We really could use a single trigger mode in the mod sequencer as well. There isn't one. Because the whole having to lift your finger off of a note and press a new note, that also can be a problem in the mod sequencer too. Because the mod sequencer is waiting for a trigger, and well, that's actually not the problem. Let me back up a second. The problem in the mod sequencer is not that. It's actually the fact that it's the opposite of that. Actually, it's when like if you're in legato mode and you play a new note, it's just gonna look at that new note and it's just gonna be like re-trigger now, regardless of what's happening, and it can interrupt what's happening in the mod sequencer. And if there was a single mode, you could have the legato, you could have legato patches, and all single mode cares about is the first note that's played. That's the trigger, and you can go around, do your legato thing, and if it's in single mode, it will not trigger again until you've lifted your fingers off of all of the notes and pressed a new note, and then the single mode will re-trigger. That would be really useful to have in the mod sequencer, because there's a couple of patches that you have to, you got to take your finger off and press a new one. I'm sorry that took so long to explain. There's stuff to explain. Things get complicated, okay? Anyway. This is also diatonic. If it's diatonic, it will say so in the patch description. With the drum beat, maybe. A little stupid dance. All right, moving right along. This one layers with sequences really well. Aftertouch. Love that patch. Pillowy chords. This is also diatonic. Boy, I wish I knew that diatonic chord trick a long time ago. I had no idea. There's also, I don't think I did this with all of the diatonic patches, but there's also inside of the I can't remember what you call these tuning files. But there's a mode in here called No Flats 1 that will pretty much just make it the scale of C no matter what you do, so you'll never have to worry about hitting a wrong chord. It'll all be in that, no matter what you hit, it'll be in the scale. But that will snap it to the key of C. You will have no choice. Just letting you know. That Aftertouch assignment is nice. Yeah, if sometimes these patches sound a little too quiet to you, it's because they're really sensitive. I like a lot of velocity sensitivity on my patches because especially when you start doing a lot of cinematic stuff, you want quiet now, okay? That's what I should be doing. Here's another one that needs to be with a drum loop. This one needs to be a little bit up higher. And of course, a minor version of that. All right, let's mute that drum loop. And into this one. I like that one. It's nice and fizzy. So is this one. Mod Wheel. Sus2, which means there's no major or minor thirds. So these sus patches, sorry about the pops. It's not an accident that that's bright. Okay. Every once in a while you need a nice bright fizzy thing to just cut through the mix. I really like this one. Mod Wheel. Maybe you should. Okay. And now we get to the drums. And all right. So I think when it comes to drum patches, y'all know I love to make drum loops. But I think in previous libraries, I did too many drum loops that were just kind of a one-note wonder all across the keyboard. And it was just kind of this, it was the same thing everywhere. And, boy, this is a squeaky chair. So I started to think about, what's the point? If it's just, if it's just a one-note wonder and it's the same thing all across the keyboard, then it might as well just be a sample. So I decided it would be more useful if there were like basses baked into the drum patch, because the kick and the bass, they always have such a close relationship. So if I did the side chaining and the ducking, or maybe just move the bass out of the way, it would make a little bit more sense. So yes. So yeah, I baked some basses. So these bass patches, they're not the only basses that are in this library. There are basses that are baked into the drum loops. So this one actually is called Bassless. That one actually is kind of a one-note wonder all across the keyboard. Except the Mod Wheel and the Aftertouch are... Okay, there's the kick and clap killer. And there's the hi-hat killer for Aftertouch. The reason that's basically just a bassless version of this patch, which is... Okay, I really like that patch. So yeah, this is just a bassless version of that. But I thought I just dig this kind of house beat. That's basically what it is. I just like it, and I just like layering other things with it. So I just left it in. So yeah, technically this one is a one-note wonder. But yeah. Okay. Got some clumsy playing today. Sorry. Okay. Mod Wheel. Aftertouch gives you some noisy shaker sounds. Really like that patch. All right, this is barely a drum patch. This is more of really a sequence. Mod Wheel opens up, actually it's phase distortion. Aftertouch gives you some noisy transients. And of course, there's a minor version of that. But trust me, you haven't gotten to the sequences yet. There's plenty of generative goodness. This one, Mod Wheel is kind of some resonant thing kind of happening. It's kind of a weird patch, but I still like it. For a long time, I've been wanting to have like an amen break, and this is kind of that. But there's a hidden like little bass underneath here. I still really like this beat though. Okay, if it was like a traditional amen break, there would be like two kick drums right here. But I decided that second kick didn't. That sounds better. But there's a hidden little thing under the mod wheel here. But yeah, these things sound really good when you layer them with chords and sequences. Roughshod. This one's a little bit. Gonna have to raise the mod wheel to get that kind of that really woody percussive thing out of the way. Otherwise, okay, but I still think it's useful. Mod wheel. That one too doesn't sound like much by itself, but when you layer it with sequences, it sounds pretty cool. The whip. This one I actually really like when you raise the filter cutoff and resonance at the same time. And then, of course, there's a minor version of it. Sometimes these side-chained duct things kind of sound a little bit better, a little bit higher. All right, enough of that. And then there is that's the patch that I was layering with the chords when I was playing the chords. Okay, so the mod wheel is a bass killer. And the Aftertouch is a kick killer. And with both up, it's just it's kind of shakers and hi-hats or whatever that is. Okay, so I really like this one. Mod wheel is a bit crusher. If that's too much bit crushing, you can actually turn the quantizer up because that's what's responsible for the bit crushing. You can make it a little bit more subtle. I just think it adds a little bit more character to it. Okay, onto the leads. Very loose terminology for leads. It's mostly just kind of like, it's things that aren't pads, it's not chords, it's not sequences, it's not drums, it's just whatever you can play a melody with. That's basically my criteria for leads. Okay. Just the bells, the mod wheel does. And then some vibrato for the aftertouch. It's nice sounding. And then hammered harp. Might sound better. Kind of morphs into something a little bit fizzy. Okay. I really like this one. I'm still debating on whether or not by default it should be an octave higher. Mod wheel. Mod wheel kind of makes it sound kind of like a square. Saw to pulse. It's nice. This is just, it's what you think it's going to be. Your obligatory saw lead patch. You can also do legato if you want to. I don't know. I have mixed feelings sometimes about whether I want to go mono or legato with one of these big Blade Runner saw lead things. Because honestly, when I play lead, a lot of my melodies are nothing fancy. Okay, it's up to you whether you want mono or legato. It's the obligatory saw lead patch, okay? I don't always do it, but this time I just kind of felt like it, and I liked it, so I left it in there. I really like this one. It's kind of old school. Some PWM in there. I like it. This one is it's kind of a weird, kind of plucky thing. Mod wheel. It's got a weird delay thing happening. And I just really like the sound of that. Okay? And that's kind of why that patch is in there, because I just think that... I just think that sounds cool. Mod Wheel. That's a really pleasant patch, especially when you reach for some third-party plugins and put like Valhalla Shimmer on there and stuff. Nice. Another one that. This one was part of an experiment to see how thick of a PWM that I could get, and you'll notice that I'm using the mod sequencer here. These are being used as 4 separately phased, like they're phased apart LFOs. See how that works? And they're all modulating, and I do this a couple of times in this library. It's one of my favorite sounds. If you have like 4 detuned PWM oscillators, a lot of people, they'll just modulate the pulse width with a single LFO. And that'll still sound kind of cool, but it'll kind of sound really phasey, and the reason for that is because all of the oscillators are being modulated with just one LFO, the pulse width, I mean. And it sounds cooler when you use, if you're going to use 4 oscillators with pulse width modulation, it's just that whole thing sounds so much cooler when the pulse widths are modulated by an independent LFO, and the LFOs are all kind of phased apart. So not only do you have that nice detuned sound because all the oscillators are detuned, but the pulse width is doing something different with each oscillator constantly. So it just makes it thicker and wider, and it's not done enough. Okay, so I feel very strongly about this. I love it. This is kind of an old school John Carpenter-y kind of a thing. If you can get like a cheesy little arpeggio going with your right hand. You know where I'm going with this, okay? So, I love this patch. This is a familiar sound from my take on the classic patch from the DX Slevin. I don't want to get sued, okay? But we know this sound. Okay, it's a familiar sound. It's one of my favorite sounds from that synth. But it's like a detuned version of it, okay? So I've got some things happening here that aren't on that patch. You know which patch I'm talking about, okay? Moving right along to the pads. You will notice there aren't too many pads. I've made a lot of libraries and tons of pads for all of them. But this one has somewhere around 15, 16 pads. I didn't go overboard. But they're still good pads. I love my pads. Fractal resonance. Aftertouch. Does some phase distortion. Stank face. All right. Remember that PWM thing that I was talking about? This is my favorite pad in the library, and it's one of my favorite PWM pads that I've ever made. Listen to that. So it is again that these LFOs, think of them as LFOs with staggered phases, okay? So they're all modulating the pulse widths separately and independently. And when you detune your big PWM pad, it sounds so much fuller and thicker and bolder and richer when you modulate the pulse widths of each oscillator separately and independently with phased apart LFOs. It's very important, okay? Same thing is happening with the second one. It's just different envelope settings and... Some people might think that, like, oh, the attack, the attack is too sudden. I don't know, man. I hear a lot of pads, modern pad design today, I think, is a little bit too attacky. And you hear these glorious pads, and they're huge and wonderful. But I think there's way too much focus nowadays on pads just like bleeding in really slowly, and then they take forever to release. And it just doesn't really allow for a lot of, chord changes and stuff. I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of modern cinematic music, it's like always locked into one key, because there's so much reverb and delay and going on, so many walls of sound. It's impossible to have a chord change, and I'm kind of old school that way. I kind of like... chord changes, man. Mix it up. And I think that maybe we need to get back to playable, some playable pads that you can perform with that aren't gonna go on forever. Just my personal thoughts and feelings. Sorry for the rant. Moving right along. Mod Wheel gives it kind of a texture. Some of these pads on this library, I wanted to focus on kind of dark and distorted. All right. This is similar to a pad that I made in Equinox. I believe it was called Fluttering Trumpets. It's basically using kind of similar techniques here. But I just made this one kind of extra fluttery. I rarely go back to an idea and repeat something that I've kind of done before, but this one I think is a little bit more, especially at low velocities. It's kind of chaotic sounding, and I kind of like that. Anyways. Mod Wheel. The velocity on my new Akai MPK 249 is a little bit weird. The keys, the way that they've done it, it's kind of hard to really get control of the velocity. Sometimes the velocity on these keys feels like the velocity is either at its minimum value or just goes right to the maximum value all of a sudden, and it can be kind of annoying. But it's not the worst. I'm getting a little bit used to it. Anyways. Love this pad. Mod Wheel. Something special going on with Aftertouch. It's not just vibrato depth, but I can't remember what I did. This one's kind of trippy. Kind of a reverse sound. Aftertouch has got some resonant things. Interesting. Magenta. This one's a bit vintagey. A lot of the time when I make vintage pads, I'm literally thinking like cheesy, low budget, like direct-to-video action movie, you know. I'm literally, some people might play that sounds cheesy. Well, that was the frame of mind that I was in, because I kind of like those VHS tape kinds of. I'm a big fan of I think Phonak 2 from Psychic Modulation. The cheesy, wonky, like VHS, like fluttering, weird kind of, yeah. Sometimes I'm in that frame of mind. This one is so organic. I'm just realizing as I'm playing this is that my face is probably over here because I can't see that right now. So Bazille this whole time has probably been like tucked under my face. Sorry about that. Love that pad. Parallel World. This one's a little weird because it's... It's kind of a sync pad, right? Mod Wheel is kind of a... I love light playing. I love soft, quiet sounds. That's where my heart is right there. Lots of layered sounds, pads nice and quiet. If you're playing a pad and every once in a while something sounds like okay, don't overdo it. That's a pad? Well, not really. Obviously. This one has these octaves and fifths. I did a lot of patches like this in Diva. It's got a bunch of octaves and fifths and octaves below, fifths and octaves above, and just stick to basic triads. Like I said, stick to simple chord formulas like basic triads. Don't go overboard with here, because this is a good one to kind of plug an arpeggio into. Okay, I'm literally just playing a basic triad. Aftertouch does this weird. It's weird. This sounds really cool though when you plug it into an arpeggiator. Basic triads, maybe a couple of different octaves of the same triad. I'm just playing just 2 octaves of C minor. I love that pad. It's not really a pad though, is it? It's in the pad section just because it's dreamy. But it's more of a pluck kind of sound. Sometimes these things are hard to categorize. Another vintagey kind of thing. Some modulation of those delay times. Okay, sequences. This is where things start to get, well, modular. Now remember that stacked triads atmosphere? Let's go back to that real quick. Remember this one? Remember those stacked triads, that A minor, G minor, and E minor? You stack those triads up together and it becomes this big, like, diatonic 12-note chord. And wait, I think I got ahead of myself here. Yeah, these dancing triads. That's doing the same thing, and those 2 patches layered together sound so good. I'm actually going to go into this other version of Bazille here, see if I can get away with 2 of these running my screencast software. Let's just put that atmosphere, that stacked triads atmos. I would go for a slower PWM though. I'd probably go for something more around like 90. Maybe just 100. back on that drum. That's what I was looking for. Put it back on that drum loop because I don't want this big, huge, CPU-intensive chord running in the background. Okay, so next sequence. Speed that BPM up a little bit to 114. I'm a 114 BPM kind of guy. Let's go hunting for One-Eyed Billy's buried treasure. I don't want to get sued. You know where that you've heard it. You've heard it before. You know where. Okay, so this one's a little weird. Mod Wheel does this kind of stutter echo thing. And Aftertouch, bright bubbles. It's a little strange, but cool. This one, Mod Wheel, Aftertouch, that little FM texture. Okay, this is another one that really, it says right here, the downbeat is intentionally ducked so you can layer this patch with drum loops. This is another one of those patches that sounds better with a drum loop. It turns into this really tight pluck when you open the mod wheel up. You see how by itself this patch seemed too bright by itself, but when we mixed it with the drums and that bass, okay, then it made sense in context. This is one thing I'm starting to notice when I create patches and I layer them together as I'm making them. I end up with some patches that, like I said, by themselves, it's like, oh, that's too bright, or oh, that's too dark. But no, when you mix things together, it starts to make sense. Okay, I'm starting to have a fuller appreciation of that these days. I like this one. It's another paired one, major and minor. Aftertouch, some ping, extra ping, and of course the minor version of it. Like I said, I tried to see if I could do a diatonic version with that mod map trick, but they're busy. Mod mappers are busy. But there's both major and minor versions for you to use when you're working on something, and you're like, oh no, I need a minor version. Oh, there it is, right there. Okay. Don't breathe on the SM58. Sorry. I love this one. Listen. You You see how it's repetitive, but it's evolving at the same time? That's because this is another thing that I learned from the great Howard Scar, is there's a sequence in here, but as you can see that in the time base, it's like 1070. It's a really fast. You can see how fast this frequency is moving. It's really fast. And of course, the thing it's a sample sequence. And the sequence, the notes, these notes that are coming out of the sequencer here are being sampled and held by this unipolar LFO here. It's basically a square wave. But since it's at 16th notes, that's much slower than the rate that these notes are just spilling out of the mod sequencer. And that will cause, when you sample a sequence at a different speed, with the signal that's doing the sampling and holding, when your sample and hold is at a different speed than the sequence that's being sampled, okay, you end up with this beautiful thing where it's repetitive, there's repetition, but it slowly evolves. So you get both of those characteristics of randomness but repetitiveness at the same time. It's really cool. And the mod wheel is just super sweet sounding. And every once in a while I will mention which patches layer really well with other patches, and it doesn't say that. I think there's a patch in here that says that it layers really nicely with Night Owls. I think we'll get to it. This is just full major. Thought it was pretty. Part of the plan. So this is kind of a sus4 chord. So it can be layered with either major or minor chords, because there's no minor third or major third. It's a little weird. And this one, a little Stranger Thingsy. But the mod wheel doesn't do what you're thinking it's going to do. It becomes all FME. A word I just made up. Okay. And this one, there's a couple of patches in here. I told you about this before. When you're doing when you're modulating the amplitude of an envelope with one of these, it becomes harder. It becomes a little bit difficult to properly do the velocity scaling. There might be a way around that, but I haven't figured out what it is. But yeah, so this one doesn't really have any velocity sensitivity because I'm explaining the same thing too many times. The amplitude of the envelope is being modulated by another modulation source. Yeah. So this is a nice, pretty one. It's kind of a weird, scratchy texture that the mod wheel kind of brings in. I did a lot of weird modulations here. And of course, a minor version of that. Mod mappers are used up, so I wasn't able to do a diatonic version of it. This is also another one of those stacked triad things that works with those other stacked triad pads. I even say so. This patch layers beautifully with the stacked triads and the dancing triad sequence. All three of those together, sound great. A little bit of vibrato there. When you layer these with percussion and start sidechaining things, oh, it's so beautiful. Roots and fifths. You can go either major or minor with this. Woo, a little bright. That's something that I would just kind of sprinkle over the top of something else because it's just roots and fifths, so you can layer it on top of major or minor things. It doesn't matter. Okay, so there's three versions of this. Forgive me. One's diatonic and the two are major and minor, but they have minor sevenths, they have flat sevenths and major sevenths. So here is... Normally I make the mod wheel kind of open filters and stuff, so things usually get brighter, but this time I kind of like the sound of it just getting darker. Okay, but there's a major seventh in there. And with the minor, it's the flat seventh. Of course, you get the Aeolian thing. Okay. Major and minor sevenths, they don't always gel with what you're doing. And when I looked in here, I noticed after the fact that, I have open mod mappers. If I wanted to, I can do a diatonic version of it. And I did. So I made a diatonic version using that mod mapper trick. But I thought, when I was doing this, I thought those major and minor sevenths, they don't really kind of gel into that whole diatonic thing because your five chord needs to be dominant. So I thought, let's just ditch the seventh and we'll just go with basic triads. So this one is just basic triads. Okay. So that way, when you get to your fifth, it makes sense in a diatonic situation. If I had like flat sevenths and major sevenths in there, it wouldn't work. Okay. Drum loop. Okay. And I know with those drum loops, it's a little bit dancey. It's a little, I wasn't expecting to really go that far with the 4 on the floor thing, but there is quite a bit of 4 on the floor in this library. It just happened, okay? So Whew, that was bright. And of course, the minor version of that. Put that back over here. I really like this one. Lots of generative programming, so lots of random cherry picking of pentatonic scales, all kinds of things. Because that can just sit there. Okay, as does this one. Whoops, my finger slipped. The resonance mod wheel. I just like patches that can just kind of sit there. I even have a button on my controller. A lot of the times I'll just program like this, and it's just going. So anywho, there is Solstice for Bazille, and I hope you enjoy it. It was an honor to be with you today, and I really hope that this is a nice little companion piece to Equinox, which went swimmingly well with my audience, and I had a lot of people send me emails asking me to revisit Bazille and maybe do a sequel for Equinox. But like I said, I'd like to think of this as kind of a companion piece. But thank you for watching and being patient. As I talk too much, I will click Control R and let you go today. Thank you. Goodbye.